You're listening to the #1 podcast show, Brother to Brother, with hosts Courtney, Anthony, and Christian, where we mentor our boys to be kings. Never miss an episode by listening every Thursday from 8 to 9 p.m. Check us out at www.brotherstalk.com. To join the conversation, call us at 917-889-7895.
Read some statistics on what I found out, and since I've worked in the community before, this is actually beneficial. So when we're discussing anger management, back in 2012 and 2013, the Department of Juvenile Justice did a study where they said, according to the department, misdemeanors, which is simple assault and battery, was the most common back in 2012 and 13, where there was approximately 11,885 delinquency arrests for misdemeanor and assault. So one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to mentor young men so they would not be a part of, well, I wouldn't really say a part of, I wouldn't say not be a part of the numbers, but we're trying to decrease the numbers because, you know, we're trying to help people and stuff like that. Because our young boys are being left behind, we definitely want to find an alternative way to assist young men. Right now, I'm the host, Jason, and I also have another host on the line, Courtney. Would you like to introduce yourself?
All right, this is Courtney. Sorry I'm a little late, guys. I missed part of your intro, Jason, but I'm glad to be here.
Okay, cool. So one of the things that what we've been discussing back and forth through email is just talking about anger management and anger management. And one of the things that we've discovered is that anger is definitely a normal and emotional response, and it really affects people at different times and different situations. So some of the situations that young men that I've found that I've come in contact with, it varies across the board from their living situation, from peer pressure, and just daily stresses. Some of the stuff that I actually discovered is if people anger levels change according to whatever is going on in their life, and that's very true. Some common factors can also contribute to the feeling of being under pressure, also being treated unfairly. And I've been an angry person because I felt like I was being treated unfairly, so I can relate to that. And also being discriminated against or bullied. In addition to that, some people might feel dissatisfaction and also frustrated as to why the anger level increases over a period of time. One of the things I would say is that a lot of times people tend to hold in anger, and holding in your anger is really not appropriate, because when you hold it in, you bottle a lot of stuff up, and then you tend to explode at the wrong individual. But my question to you, Courtney, what would you say about anger when it comes to young men, what you've seen?
I mean, what I've seen so I didn't really give a little bit of my background. I don't know if you did, but, I worked in the Orange County area, I would say about 6 or 7 years, working in all different grade levels as a substitute teacher. So I was able to work with quite a few different kids. Also worked at the level with, kids with behavioral problems and, different issues just going on with them. So I've seen pretty much every type of anger there is, So you have different levels. You have your explosive anger, and, you and I conversed about, our personalities and our levels of anger. So I would describe myself as a person with regression anger. You would probably describe yourself as somebody with more explosive anger. So what would happen with kids? Yeah, and the thing is, of course, you're going to notice somebody with explosive anger first. because they're the ones they're loud, they just let loose right then. So and with them, they have so many different triggers. And triggers are very important. We need to find out what it is that makes us upset if we're trying to avoid anger. So it could be whatever, and someone with explosive anger reacts explosively. They'll just go off, whether it's actually physical violence or whether it's auditory. They just go off, and they don't need much pushing for that. And so the negative side effects of explosive anger is, you kind of make people afraid of you. You may end up being isolated. Those are some of the negative side effects of explosive anger. And, of course, not as much with younger people, but as you get older, if you continue to be this way, negative side effects are actually like real health issues like, heart attacks, headaches, increased anxiety, strokes. These are things that can lead to someone with explosive anger. Now, what I had when I was younger would be more of regression anger, which is suppressing your anger. So someone does something you don't like, I'm not the person to react right away, but I would think about it and it will bottle up. And the bad side about that is, if you're suppressing something, when it comes up, it can actually be worse than even somebody with explosive anger. But the immediate downside of regressive anger is it really hurts you. So it can lead to anxiety and depression and things like that right away.
Well,
So
let me give a little background before, because we've had a conversation before, and hopefully help some of these young men understand how to deal with their anger and manage anger better. When I was younger, I was much more of a shy and quiet kid. So I used to have people say and do things to me without me saying anything to them. And, there was a point in my life when I was 19 years old where we talked about this recently, where something happened in my life that was significant, and I decided I was no longer going to be that way. Because here's the thing. I find for myself, when I hid a lot of stuff without vindictive things, mean things, just outright mean. So for me, it was more so that if I'm able to get my thought across, and I know sometimes it came off as being mean, but if I'm able to get my thought across without holding it in, I let it go. Versus individuals who I've known that has actually bottled things up, as you said, they can go on for months without even saying anything, and then eventually, when that right person comes across that makes them upset, then all of a sudden it's that little kick because they remember stuff that happened previously, and all of a sudden, since it's been going on for so long, they just kick and it's more explosive. So I guess for me, it doesn't matter whether it is regressive or explosive. It's all bad regardless. So part of the thing that we're trying to do when we mentor these young guys is try to come up with ways, alternative ways, for them to not really hold it in, but also not really try to be explosive. We're trying to come up with several ways, or teach them several ways of how to handle it better. One of the studies that I've actually seen was, and I've talked to individuals before, is the best thing to do is write. Because when you write, then they're able to express themselves, whether it's writing it to the individual that got them upset or just writing it just to express themselves. I think that's probably one of the best things for these individuals to do. Let me do this before you respond. We need to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back with the individuals. If you would like to call in to join the discussion, definitely give us a call at 917-889-7895, and we'll be right back with you. Brother to Brother. You are joining the host, Jason, myself, as well as Courtney, and we were just talking about anger and anger management. Do you have now, when you worked in the school system, what advice would you give to individuals that's dealing with peer pressure right now when it comes to or even anger? Like, have you ever sat down with a student that was an angry student, you gave them advice, and what advice did you give them?
Absolutely. So when it comes to anger, man, well, what I mentioned with explosive anger, what I should have gone into a little more detail is there are positive ways or better ways to handle your anger without being explosive. So, for instance, when someone is disrespecting you, instead of bottling it up like I used to, or instead of just going real, overboard on them, what you can do is just speak up for yourself. So that's something that you can do, just letting people know where your boundaries are before it gets too bad. So, with kids, a lot of times as a substitute teacher, I'm coming into a new environment. So I don't know where the beats are. I don't know who dislikes whom or what the trigger points are. So I walk into a classroom and I hear a couple kids talking. I think they're friends, and a minute later they're going off on each other. They're fighting or they're bickering. So once I separate a kid, first thing I want to know is what caused it. What caused the situation? What made you upset? And then most of the times with kids, they probably don't feel that way, but most of the times when they get into arguments, it's over something that's pretty small. So I just try to get them to think, man, like just stop reacting. Use your head. Like it wasn't that serious. The guy made a joke about your shoes being dirty, and you tried to choke him, or you tried to slam him. It wasn't that serious. So, and then of course, you always got to think about consequences. So when I'm working with kids, especially as they get a little bit older and they can start seeing the end of the line, and it's like, okay, so you've been suspended 4 times this year, and you know how many suspensions you can get for an entire year before you just getting kicked out of school. So, what is your end game? Like, was it really worth it to go over to react that way in that situation when you know what's going to happen next? And then when it comes to peer pressure, that's something I'll be honest, I didn't really deal with it, so I wouldn't be the best person to talk to kids about that, because when it came to me, I was always an individual who, I always just did my own thing. I had friends, but it wasn't necessarily, I never had to be the popular kid, so I didn't have to do the crazy things that everybody else was doing to be cool. I was just me, and if you accepted me, you accepted me. If you didn't, you didn't. So when it comes to peer pressure, kids, I just got to tell them, like, be a leader, not a follower. That old saying. Just think for yourself.
When you talk about being explosive, I did not learn how not to be explosive until I was in my adult years. And I think it's because when I was younger, I used to hold so much stuff in, and I used to let it get to me. I dealt with a slight depression. I dealt with identity issues as far as, like, I've always been the bigger kid, the darker kid, and stuff like that. So there was a lot of low self-esteem when I was growing up. So I had a lot of anger, and it's not necessarily. And I think for me it was more so because I didn't love myself as to why I was so angry. I was bullied when I was in school. My bullying actually started when I was in 5th grade, and it actually went up until I was in 7th grade. So for about 2.5 years, I was bullied. So I think a lot of times what children fail to realize, and what I failed to realize when I was younger, is that it's just a momentary thing, because we have a lot of ripple effects that's going on nowadays when it comes to children that is either being peer pressured or that has anger. And what they fail to realize is that even one mistake, having this explosive anger, because believe me, I've been expelled out of school before. It was not my finest moment when I was younger, but now that I'm older, I understand why people didn't want to deal with me, and I understand why. I understand my issues now versus back then. You're just living for the moment. So I definitely understand and respect that. And I think one of the things that I want to teach children is that a normal emotion, but what's normal is not how they handle it in a negative way. So we're trying to teach these young men, especially Hispanics and Black, we're the highest number of incarceration from the juvenile side up until the adult side. So one of the things that we definitely want to teach these young men is that, yes, anger is okay, but what's not okay is when you take it to the next level. Because certain things can happen to where you're just in a fight, next thing you know, you pull out a knife or a gun, or you do what they call the one punch, where literally you can hit somebody one time, they hit the floor, they can hit their head on the ground, and now you're all of a sudden, from just a simple fight, it comes into a first-degree murder because of the one punch. So definitely, I understand everything that you're saying. I was never one of those children that followed other people. I was also an individual, but that's just because of everything that has probably happened to me from when I was younger up until, my teenage years. Let me say this. Right now we have a caller on the line, so let me get this individual on the line to see what they would like to bring to the table. So bear with me a second. Hey, caller, thank you for calling. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Sarah Lewis, and I'm calling from Chicago.
So what is your question today?
If you're a single parent or guardian raising a child with an anger issue, what advice can you give us when they have an outburst?
Oh, would you like to take this, Courtney?
Would I like to take this? Sure, Ms. Lewis, I would love to take this. So, dealing with kids with anger, it's important for you to know as a parent that anger in itself is not all negative. Like, there are positive ways that you can handle anger. There are definitely constructive things that they can do. If you're into football, if you're into any of these contact sports, most of these guys do it because, they have redirected anger and they've been able to use it in a positive way, But dealing with the kid at the time, like I said, I'm a talker. Like I like to get into people's heads. I have a psych degree. I like to really understand what's going on with the kid, not what you did, but why you did it. And then once they start to understand why they're doing things, and then they start to understand their triggers, then you can start leading them to other things like pinpointing. Once you pinpoint the trigger, then you can start leading them to different things like ways to get around it, like situations like how to walk away from things, how to calm down, and most importantly is which is probably hard when you're younger, but I definitely learned this as I got older, is restructuring your thoughts. So it's not about what happens to you; it's about how you're looking at things. So, when I was younger, somebody stepped on your shoes, you might turn around and haul off and punch them. But why are you looking at it that way? So restructuring thoughts is definitely something that you can help with the child. Just getting them to look at things differently. And, of course, you always have consequences and things like that. Do you have anything to add on that, Jason?
Yeah, one of the things that I read, which is interesting to me, I've always known not to get on the child's level because a lot of times, which I find that it's okay to be your child's friend. However, you also have to be your child's parent as well. And one of the things that I was actually reading is where they say not to get on the child's level. And two, you also do not want to tell that child how they feel because it could be something as simple as where the parent may have done, child may not agree with the parent, and the child gets angry and angrier every time something happens. So it's best to actually have that open line of communication with your child. So I would definitely say for any parent or guardian that is raising, even if it's parents, because now we live in a society where we have single-parent households and children are being raised with grandparents. And I have a tough grandmother. Believe me, I have a very tough grandmother. But I would definitely say that they need to leave the line of communication open. They also have to let that child express themselves because a lot of times when children don't express themselves, they that anger manifests in other ways. So I definitely agree with everything that you have said when it comes to communication. Like I said, I tend to communicate much more now than when I was younger. When I was younger, I was not explosive or disrespectful to my parents, but I had to learn in my older age that not everything that comes my way has to be a fight. And I have to think, sometimes I have to actually, even in my adult years, I still have to sit back and think about what I'm going to say and do before I actually do it. And then one of the other things I was reading is like some of the management. Let me tell you what I used to do, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but when I would get to the level of anger, sometimes I would just go in a room and just yell out. Because a lot of times that's just me relieving stress versus taking the stress out of somebody else. Now, that sounds a little psychotic in some ways, but it really does help for individuals like myself. Once again, the whole writing thing, sometimes these parents, I had a friend that was a mentor to a young girl who was not, she was not an angry child, but she was also not a sociable child. So one of the things my friend did, which I learned from my friend, she used to give this girl a journal, and whatever happened to her within the day or the week, she would journal it. My friend would read the journal because that was part of her exercise, and then they'll discuss. So I think a lot of times that might be an outlet for a parent to do with a child or a guardian to do with a child, even an adult, because, a lot of times children may not necessarily have someone that they trust within the family structure, so they might have somebody outside of the family structure to speak with. So I'll definitely say if they can communicate through writing, if that's one of their passions, or even through music, of a lot of children, take them out somewhere, and that might help them. And just keep the open lines of communication. You always want to be honest. For me, I believe, for my nephews, they're much older now, but I believe in an honest line of communication. There's nothing that a child can tell me that I would judge them for. And I think that's what really I wanted to start this podcast, because a lot of times people don't think that children know a lot and that they judge children and they want to shut children up. But for us, it's more so that we need, these children need an outlet such as this type of structure. Before I continue, I just want to thank Ms. Lewis for calling in and asking her question. That was a very good question. We have about 5 minutes left on the podcast. Do you have anything else to add as far as how parents or young boys can, what young boys can do moving forward when it comes to anger management?
In my opinion, there are quite a few things. And what I didn't, I know we tend to say this show is mainly geared towards young men. But what I forgot to ask Ms. Lewis was the age of the child and the sex of the child, because that does matter when dealing with anger. Females and males do handle these things differently.
Okay.
I'll repeat it again.
Just speak on both.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well,
you can speak on both.
Okay, like you said, with females, speaking with them is best, I believe. Writing definitely does help for them. They express their anger in a different way, usually. So speaking is very important for females. With males, sometimes I know used to work for me is more physical things. So whether you want to get your son a punching bag to go up to beat up on, or whether you just want him to get out and run a little bit. Even now, I'm an adult. I'm 37 years old. And I notice, I like to work out, but there's nothing better than a frustrating day of work or a frustrating day period to go to the gym. I notice I can hit it a little harder and get my aggression out that way. But yeah, definitely as your kids get older, getting them to see the world differently and restructuring their thoughts is huge.
So you're different than me because you work out. I just started getting back into the gym. I actually, when I was younger, I didn't feel, hey, if people see me, they'll understand why I just got back into the gym. So when I was younger, I actually felt like I didn't have friends. So one of the things I actually started to do was write, and that's how I ended up starting writing short stories and poetry.
There you go.
Just because I was more of a loner. So yeah, I would definitely say there's so many different outlets that children can get involved in. Sports is one, writing is one. Some children like to sing, some children like theater. I think there might be some children who also need therapy. Let's just put it out there, because they don't necessarily have anybody, and even when they do have somebody, they might not trust that person enough. So if none of the methods that we have, and I'll also post it on social media as well as some alternative methods for young children to get into, if there's no other methods and they feel like they need extra therapy, whether it's going to a guidance counselor or just a mentor, I would definitely say that to do that. One of the things I know is Big Brother, Big Sister is another outlet. We're not on that scale yet, so and hopefully we do get there, because that's one of my goals. But maybe something like Big Brother, Big Sister is also another way for them to get in the help that they need. Now, right now it shows that we actually only have about 2 minutes. If anybody else has anything to add, you're more than welcome to give us a call at 917-889-7895. Or you can also visit us on social media, which is Twitter, which is @brother.
You just tuned in to Brother with hosts Courtney, Anthony, and Christian. Check us out at www.brotherstalk.com. Follow us on Facebook at Brother and Twitter at Brothers_Talk. Join us again next week as we continue to mentor our boys to be kings.